God is present. We continue our reading of the Genesis, that is the first book of the Pentateuch of Moses. Today we are going to read the passage about the third day, that is about the creation of life. And we're going to see that in our study here of the Pentateuch of Moses, of the book of Genesis. So we read chapter 1, verses 9 to 13. It is the passage, the third day, life. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered in one place, so that the dry land will appear." And so it was. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth grow grass, plants yielding seed of each kind, and trees bearing fruit of each kind, that has its seeds within it upon the earth." And so it was. And the earth put forth grass, plants yielding seed, and trees bearing fruit of each kind. And God saw that it was good. And it was evening, and it was morning, third day. Here is narrated the richness of the life cycle of God's creation. The soil is the womb to sow and nurture the seeds of life. Water is its agent. Nature emerged to be a symbol of fertility, generation, and nurturing of its offspring. It is the center of unity and duality. It's the very definition of life, which we imitate and dedicate ourselves to. Being an individualistic or collectivist, we inherently are always fighting for life. And that's what we see here in this passage. This emergence of life and also the birth of the earth. This creation of the planet Earth. And here we see that the cyclical pattern of life is as follows: seed, conception, formation, spring, decay, putrefaction, and then resurrection. So we could see here in our board that we are talking about life. And here in this passage, we already see at least or at least have a glimpse of its cycle that will later on be defined, be discussed by science, by the investigation, by these unique characteristics of ourselves, of us humans, to look for truth, to search for the truth. So we see here that life has a cycle, and we can even separate it in the seed, that is that unity that gathers all the complexity of life in a simple form of matter, that and that later on will sprout, will grow into something beautiful, that is life itself. And then we have an agent of the seed to make it start its processing of creation, that is conception. And this goes in the different realms of life on earth, that is the vegetation and even the animal realms of life. From conception we have formation. From formation, we will have the moment of birth, the spring, the growth of that life. And then from spring, we will go to a process of decay, that it is a characteristic of matter. And from decay, we will go to another stage prior to the returning to the seed. That is the moment of putrefaction. And we perhaps connected this idea of putrefaction with something ugly, with the horror that is represented in movies. But it's actually a natural process of matter to go back to its primary state of minerals and help the next life to grow, to be brought up to this world, at least in this materialistic aspect of life. And here, this cycle shows us that there is never an ending, as in the sense of ceased existence. That which is dead, between quotes, also brings life, between quotes. It is a unique aspect of this cycle. That which appears to have ceased its existence actually is the foundation of another life, for another emergence of existence in this world. And this comprehension extends beyond the perception of materiality. It goes to what lies precisely in the primordial substance that sustains this cycle. A very ancient wisdom is that we are formed by two principles regarding an earthly life, and that is spirit and matter. As we will see, this is also defined as the unity and duality of life. Nature, the word nature, is a funny and intriguing word, because its broader and strict meanings carry the same principle of pertaining to the foundation and sustainer of. So here is a reflection on the word nature, which, as we just said here, in its broader and strict meanings, we will find the same principle. And here is the principle of pertaining to the foundation and sustainer of. That is, nature in itself is the foundation of life and also its sustainer. And here we go to that discussion of what is narrated here in the third day, that is the creation of earth and its vegetation, the principle of life, the moment where what we now have as trees, plants, flowers, fruits are being formed to where we are right now. And nowadays, more and more studies are dedicated to understanding the functionality and complexity of a worldwide web of the interconnectedness of trees and, in consequence, vegetation. It is interesting to see how connected they are. It makes you even think that Cameron the director of Avatar, that is James Cameron, he wasn't so far from the idea of how nature is connected, right? Even though he brought in a science fiction movie, it's still the principle, the idea of interconnectedness of the nature, of trees, of life in itself, wasn't that far off. And Earth is a much more complex being than we can imagine. With time, science has been going after the insight and intuition that religion brought with the narrative of God's creation of the world, what we just saw here in this passage of the third day. This insight, this intuition of the creation of nature, of Earth, through God, and how it is connected with everything, is further on investigated by science. As Brother Paiva Netto expresses, what religion knows intuitively, science one day will prove in the laboratory. Science without religion can lead to dryness of the soul. Religion without science can degenerate into fanaticism. That's why in the ideal age that we all want to see coming over the horizon of history, science, that is brain and mind, enlightened by love, religion, a fraternal heart, will raise human beings up to conquer truth. Remember what we said, what we've been talking throughout all these videos here, is that we all are in a path to find our way, our truth, and then our life. And Christ shows up exactly that, how Him is the way, the truth, the life that we are all searching for. Trees, they carry scientific value to comprehend life, as well as a symbolic and religious value to what we subconsciously infer as a divine source of wisdom and connection to God. That is, the relation to our divine root. As Eliade, in his book The Sacred and the Profane, we find here him talking about the trees, and he is precisely discussing about its symbolism to the religious man. Writes Eliade, the tree came to express everything that religious man regards as preeminently real and sacred. This sacredness is also brought by Wolleben in the introduction of his book The Hidden Life of Trees, by talking about the different time and space that they live, how they organize themselves, and how different is for them this, I wouldn't say perception, but this experience of time and space. It is very interesting. He writes, one reason that many of us fail to understand trees is that they live on a different time scale than us. One of the oldest trees on Earth is more than 9,500 years old. That's 150 times longer than the average human lifetime. Creatures with such a luxury of time on their hands can afford to take things at a leisurely pace. The electrical impulses that pass through the roots of trees, for example, move at the slow rate of 1/3 of an inch per second. But why, you might ask, do trees pass electrical impulses through their tissues at all? The answer is that trees need to communicate, and electrical impulses are just one of their many means of communication. Trees also use the senses of smell and taste for communication. If a giraffe starts eating an African acacia, the tree releases a chemical into the air that signals that a threat is at hand. As the chemicals drifts through the air and reaches other trees, they smell, between quotes, and are warned of the danger. Even before the giraffe reaches them, they begin producing toxic chemicals. Insect pests are dealt with slightly differently. The saliva of leaf-eating insects can be tasted, between quotes, by the leaf being eaten. In response, the tree sends a chemical signal that attracts predators that feed on that particular leaf-eating insect. And he concludes, life in these lowlands is clearly not always dull. So that makes us think, right? How complex is life and how connected is nature? There are many other examples, many other evidences to show to us that nature itself is connected, and we are connected to it because we are part of the earth, we are part of nature. Now, what we see with our material eyes as a tree that is, let's say, as a statue, not actually showing any function, any functionality to the world, can precisely be doing a lot in a different perception and perspective of time and space. Now, one thing is interesting. When we talk about the earth, when we talk about nature, when we talk about all this complexity of life that presents to us also a simplicity, we connected this idea very naturally to as we said in the beginning, to a feminine idea, that is, we say, Mother Earth, naturally. And this is a very close connection that pertains to our daily lives, is the idea that nature represents the feminine, hence naturally receiving the name of Mother Nature. This is sacred. There's no question about it. This also brings the remarkable notion that sacredness is connected to what persists through time and space. It lies in a different dimension where formless and form converge into unison. Again, unity and duality, as we've been talking about here. Now, this sacred view of the representation of Earth as a mother, it is also brought by Mircea Eliade in his book, again, The Sacred and the Profane, when he discusses the image of the Earth as a mother. And here we find exactly how it is that we put this image, this natural notion of Earth being a mother to all of us. Writes Mircea Eliade, the image is found throughout the world in countless forms and variants. It is the Terra Mater or Tellus Mater, so familiar to Mediterranean religions, who gives birth to all beings. That human beings are born of the earth is a universally disseminated belief. In a number of languages, man is called the earth-born. It is the religious experience of autochthony. The feeling is that of belonging to a place, and it is a cosmically structured feeling that goes far beyond family or ancestral solidarity. The dying man desires to return to Mother Earth to be buried in his native soil. So we see here that Mircea Eliade is talking about this natural feeling of belonging to a place that we have, and it is connected precisely to this notion of a earth that is our mother, a place, a soil that we want to be, we want to go back, we belong to. And that's exactly what we feel with our mothers. We belong to in their lives. We belong in their houses, in being with them. And when we are sad, when we're down, when we are feeling depressed, we go after our mothers. We search for them to be embraced in their bosom, to be involved in their love. And the same goes when we are happy. Now, Mircea Eliade, he continues to explain that the symbolism of burial carries the same value of being baptized in the waters, thus transforming our current selves into another phase of our lives. We could even argue that the idea behind being buried in our native soil is to sustain the legacy of our family, friends, and nation, to be part of something that won't cease and that will persist by giving life as the memory of experience to other generations. We yearn to live and be eternal. That's in us. We yearn for that. That's natural in us. Now, this idea of eternality, of our legacy, is a persistent one that we carry in our subconscious. It is precisely related to the maintenance of life, the idea of sustaining life, of keeping it. Even if we debate and defend that we don't believe in a continuity of life in a spiritual realm after death, nature debunks us by showing that death is only a transitioning and transformative phenomenon of the essence. Now, remember the cycle that we talk about. There is a difference between the essence of plants and animals to what refers to the soul. That's something that we have to keep in our minds. Plants are not conscious of their own condition and choices. Even though we saw Holoben talking about electrical impulses, of course, this is a way to create the image for us to understand how they're connected, how they communicate between themselves. It's not a literal meaning of electrical impulses like the brain. It can have electricity because electricity is part of everything here, is in the air, is everywhere. It is one of the main characteristics of atoms with electrons and all that. Now, how it happens is very different from how it happens in our brains. In our brains, is a more complex form of electrical impulses. Maybe in the trees is a more simplistic way. Who knows? Maybe science can help us by investigating it. Again, plants, they're not conscious of their own condition and choices, while animals differ in degrees until reaching a human condition. Nature, in the sense of a self-sustained system of life, evolves its essential, its substantial condition, as in spirit and matter, through the constant exchange of the phenomenon of life and death. This is in a broader and stricter sense. Human life goes through the same. Of course, because we're talking about life, we're talking about a natural cycle of that which we are part of, nature itself. But the difference is in the causation behind this phenomenon and the conscious justification of it. And we're going to talk more about it. We have to keep in mind that giving birth is sacred, causing death is consciously damning. The conclusion then is that life is sacred since Mother Earth is the bearer of and what gives life, as the direct feeling of connectedness with something higher, something that makes you breathe and feel life itself. Can't you see that in your life? Of having in your environment flowers, plants, are going in the park to be connected with nature, to feel life. Again, Eliade sheds light on an ancestral idea of the value of life and its connection to earth, as well as the role of women in sustaining its holiness. Here, writes Eliade, all religious experiences connected with fecundity and birth have a cosmic structure. The sacrality of women depends on the holiness of the earth. Feminine fecundity has a cosmic model, that of Terra Mater, the universal generatrix. And he continues, the social and cultural phenomenon known as matriarch is connected with the discovery of agriculture by women. It was woman who first cultivated food plants. Hence, it is she who becomes owner of the soil and crops. The magical religious prestige and consequent social predominance of women have a cosmic model, the figure of Mother Earth. So that makes us think that life is not isolated from a paradoxical principle. You cannot understand it without the notion of death, thus giving value to life. And you cannot say that one life is less valuable than another, because in the essence of this statement, you are valuing your own life. Christ tells us and shows us the importance and the paradox of life, giving the sense of eternal living and death, or conservation and transformation. Eternal life is a reality. And the intricacies of life are outstandingly intriguing. Its grandness must be revering. Unfortunately, there is still a struggle to walk on a path that exalts the sacredness of nature and a strange work of worship to its desacralization. But even though there are people who are stuck in the perspective that life can literally cease to exist, there are those that realize the reality of its eternality and work to exalt and maintain the beauty of God's creation. Again, the subconscious idea and dedication toward a sense of eternality are so engraved in our souls that we can't escape the wonder of its representation through symbolic language. Because he's one of the main scholars that delve into the universal meaning of religious symbolism and also how it is connected with our lives. We can't escape that. We can't pretend that we don't have religiosity in ourselves, that we don't have spirituality in ourselves. We do. It is real. It is present in our lives. We have to stop denying it and start accepting it and working to understand. Writes Eliade here, talking about this symbolic language. It is in such symbols of a cosmic tree, or tree of immortality or knowledge, that the religious valences of vegetation are expressed with the greatest force and clarity. In other words, the sacred tree or sacred plants display a structure that is not to be seen in the various concrete vegetable species. As we noted before, it is sacrality that unveils the deepest structures of the world. The cosmos appears as a cipher only in the religious perspective. It is for religious men that the rhythms of vegetation simultaneously reveal the mystery of life and creation and the mystery of renewal, youth, and immortality. It could be said that all trees and plants that are regarded as sacred owe their privileged situation to the fact that they incarnate the archetype, the paradigmatic image of vegetation. On the other hand, what causes a plant to be noticed and cultivated is its religious value. So, we can't prevent the manifestation of our religiosity or spirituality. An example is the gardening of our house, be it inside or outside. Even the failed attempt to devalue the religious meaning of nature in an idea of aesthetic contemplation that we commonly see nowadays is a manifestation of religious worshipping of something that for the eyes and mind brings life to the room or space that is inserted in. We have a feeling of life and peace when we cultivate a garden. That is true. Just try it, you will feel it. No one needs to tell you that. Just by being in touch with nature, we feel as if life is coming back to us, as if we are connected to something greater than ourselves. That is why our perception of, or the desire of, immortality is in us, be it to defend until our material death the preservation of our material bodies, as we see, or our legacy through name and deeds. It is in us. The question is, what do we believe our focus should be? In the matter or spirit? Matter is easier because it is exactly what we see and feel. No one can deny the reality of that, of matter. The spirit, in the other hand, is quite difficult because it involves something that we yet can't see, but it doesn't mean we can't perceive it. So it is difficult in a material sense, but since it's our essence, since it's what we are eternal spirits, we can perceive it. We just have to be open to it. It is just as the farmer who knows by observing closely without the help of microscopic instruments and having faith that what dies between quotes can become sustenance for life in a material sense. We can observe the signs and perceive the existence of a reality beyond what is material. Again, Eliade writes about this. Perceive by virtue of a religious experience the specific mode of existence of the stone reveals to man the nature of an absolute existence beyond time, invulnerable to becoming. So nature itself, as we said, debunks to us this notion of a ceasing of existence after death. This certainty brings us to our last topic. By observing life, we can understand that it comes from somewhere else, that it does not pertain to the material world, but rather sustains it. It gives itself and goes back to its essence, that is, God. Nature carries duality. To the same degree that there is a material one, there is also a spiritual one. And as we have an earthly body, we also have a spiritual body. If we still don't believe that could be the case, one day the signs will be so strong, as they are starting to be, that science won't have a choice besides accepting it and working to understand its functionalities. There is a whole spiritual world where our family and friends live, and we have so much to learn about. But the time will come, as Brother Paiva evidences in his article, The Reality of Life in Other Dimensions, and that you can find in his blog, paivanetto.com. Are our friends in the spiritual world invisible? One day we will be just as invisible as they are, which does not mean that we have died and turned into the dust of the earth, as some still prefer, thinking that death ends everything. Obviously, regarding the material body, which came from the earth and to the earth shall return, this is what happens, as we read in the Old Testament of the Holy Bible in Genesis chapter 3 verse 19 and Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 20. Remember, men, that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And concludes Brother Paiva. However, these words do not apply to the Spirit, which is eternal, and of which Jesus said, "The flesh profits nothing. It is the Spirit that vivifies." We find in the Gospel of Jesus according to John chapter 3 verse 8 and chapter 6 verse 6-3. The spiritual humanity is still invisible to our material eyes, but it exists. The spiritual world is not an abstraction. And with these words of Brother Paiva, we conclude here our video. I hope that you enjoyed what we discussed here about life and saw that in the third day of the 7 days of creation of God narrated in the book of Genesis is presenting to us the emergence of life and how this simple but also complex idea affects us every day. May the light of the Christ be north of your life. Jesus lives in our hearts forever.